Right. Good evening, everyone. I can't actually start the formal agenda until 7 o'clock, but I do an introduction, which is the same every month. It'll be new to you people if you haven't been before, so I'm going to read it out. Good evening and welcome to the Woking Borough Council's planning meeting. We have a PA system, as you have noticed. Mobile phones should be on off or silent, and there is no fire drill planned. The proceedings are filmed and will be available on the Woking Borough website. You will see from the camera position that the committee members, council officers and registered speakers will be recorded. But speakers may ask not to be filmed, but their comments will be audio recorded. The planning committee is made up of 9 elected members, and I will just ask each one of them to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Angus Ross, representing Woking Lark.
Wayne Smith, member for Hurst.
Michelle Shepherd-Dubay, Winnish.
Malcolm Richards, representing Norwich in Woking Town. John Kaiser, I'm representing Bath, and I'm also deputy chair.
There's Tim Holtman, chair, Alton, which is in Lower Early.
Bill Stone, Loddon in Woodley.
Philip Holmesworth, Winnish.
Charlie Jarvis, Twyford.
Thank you very much, members. We are supported and advised by a variety of professional council officers, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves, starting on my far right.
Arabella Yander, the clerk.
My name is Lindsay Jennings and I'm a solicitor to the council.
I'm Justin Turby, lead officer for development management, here to advise officers.
I'm Chris Easton, service manager for highways, Woking Borough.
Thank you. Planning officers presenting tonight's applications are sat on my far left, and I will introduce them at the appropriate time. Right, onto the procedure. This is a quasi-judicial committee with formal set procedures and conduct. Firstly, the planning officer will present each application. Then I would call in turn only those who have pre-registered to speak. Please come forward to the table. The microphone is controlled by the grey button on the base. The time limit of 3 minutes for each category of speaker will be strictly enforced, so please ensure you get your key points across within your allotted time. Members of the committee are interested in the quality of what you have to say, not for how long you speak. And I emphasise that only those that are pre-registered to speak may speak. No others, including town and parish councillors, agents, applicants, objectors, supporters, are permitted to address the committee, ask questions or interrupt the meeting. Following the planning officer's presentation and the comments of registered speakers, the planning committee members will consider, question and seek clarification of the application and hopefully reach a decision which may or may not agree with the planning officer's recommendation. Finally, remember that the local planning authority's role is to determine any valid planning application using local and national planning policy. Our role is not to suggest alterations to schemes, whether they are a good idea or indeed needed, whether they are too costly or whether there are alternative uses. Thank you very much, and I shall now move on to tonight's agenda. So the first item is apologies. I know looking around we'll have everybody here, so there are no apologies. Minutes of the previous meeting, are there any amendments to be made? No, just show of hands, they're all okay with those minutes then? Thank you. Right. Then declarations of interest. I know I have 3 people with that, so I'll start off with Michelle.
I attended a meeting with the applicant, developer, and council case officer for item 47. For this application, I am coming to this committee with an open mind and am close to the discussion before I make up my mind on this application.
Philip, would you like to?
Thank you. As the ward member, I attended the meeting together with my fellow ward members, with the applicant and developer and the council case officer for this application. But I'm coming to this committee meeting with an open mind, and I shall listen to the discussions before I make up my mind on this application.
Indeed. John?
Yeah, I have a potential conflict of interest with item 49 at Hurst, where at the relevant time I was a non-executive director of Woking Housing.
And you'll be leaving the meeting?
I will withdraw from the meeting, yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Item 45, applications to be deferred or withdrawn.
Thank you, Chair. There's one item, 48, which is Sutton's Business Park. The applicants requested that the applications be deferred to allow for discussions relating to a revised parking layout, so they don't want to consider this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. So hopefully no one is for that application. Okay. Right. First application then is agenda item 46, which is on page 11. It's a single-storey front extension to a dwelling and covered porch. It's before the committee, but it's been listed by Councillor Lee, and last month it was deferred so we could go and have a site visit to look at the character and also to get further information on the light. The case officer is Darius, and I shall hand over to him.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. The application reference number 172013, number 2, Budges Cottages, Keep Hedge Road in Walkingham. Household application for the proposed erection of a single-story front extension to dwelling with a covered porch. A single-story front extension which would extend beyond the front wall by 1.46 meters, and the erection of a covered porch to the existing dwelling. The application was deferred from the last committee due to a site visit. Two main factors were taken into consideration during the site visit, which was a loss of light impact and the distinctiveness of the application site. The conservation officer raised no objections to the proposed extension. Normally, some concerns would be raised over the loss of symmetry when unaltered semi-detached cottages are extended. However, this existing site addition has already met the balance of this pair, and the porch addition isn't likely to result in any further material harm in this respect. Additionally, a condition has been recommended by the conservation officer to provide samples of materials before the works commence. The loss of light and 45 degrees test, the proposal would not infringe 45 degree site light from the central point of habitable ground floor window of number 1, either vertically, which we can see on the attached photograph, or horizontally. Furthermore, given its single-story scale, insignificant projection beyond the front elevation and position of the application dwelling to the north of the neighbor, it would not lead to an unacceptable level of overshadowing. And despite of the corner plot positioning, the application house is not considered to be in a prominent location due to significant setback landscaping in the front garden, which provides partial screening of this semi-detached dwelling. Recommendation: the proposed single-story front extension would not have a harmful impact on the character of the area or the residential amenities of neighboring properties. Although the risk of impact on the protected tree in the front garden is low and AMS has been recommended, it is recommended the planning committee authorizes the head of development to grant planning permission subject to conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
We have two speakers registered, the first one being Mrs. Dance, a resident, who'd like to come forward. Good evening.
Good evening. I am Mrs. Dance. My husband and I have lived at number 1 Budges Cottages for 55 years, which, as you know, is a semi-detached property. You surely cannot allow my neighbour to deface the frontage of these attractive Victorian cottages and leave us looking out at a brick wall. For the last few years of our lives, we have worked very hard and strive to maintain our cottage for our children to inherit. These cottages should be preserved. It is important to retain their visual origins. The proposed front extension and porch destroys the overall visual aspect and will affect our amenities and fills me with great sadness. I'm proud to say that I was born in Wokingham and 6 generations of my family also, and I really think that it will affect the rest of our lives. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
And
Next.
the detail on the cottages, I'm also very concerned about what's going to happen. Just to show you what I really think. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Anthony Richardson, the agent.
Good evening. Firstly, thank you for all the attention you've given to this application so far, and thanks to Darius for supporting this application. The purpose of this extension is to provide a new entrance circulation space within the property so the main living room does not become the only route through to the other parts of the house. This will also provide protection from draft and heat loss to the front room. The new extended porch allows the living room to gain back the loss of space from the new corridor. This extension creates a more efficient house and therefore more suitable for modern family living. Although the matter of loss of light has been discussed in much detail so far, I would like to emphasise that the extension is positioned to the north in relation to number 1 Budges cottages. As the sun moves to the south and west, the front window to number 1 is overshadowed by their own porch. We have a time-lapse video which the applicant made if we're able to see it, if not maybe at the end.
I'll go and just get it.
I'll carry on. It's also worth pointing out that the extension extends forward just under 1.2 metres from the front wall, not 1.5. I know from the previous committee meeting and just earlier that the depth's being quoted at 1.46. This is the depth from the side extension on the other end of the porch. I think it's important to state this, especially if assumptions are being formed about the size of the proposal and the proximity to the neighbouring window. The extension wall is approximately 1 metre away from the neighbour's window, and we would agree that dimension is minimum distance by way of condition, if that helps. In response to the comments regarding loss of character, it was a fundamental part of the original brief to maintain the character of the cottage. Much of the character comes from the materials used in the original cottages, and we would use the same materials, or if not available, like-for-like alternatives. This would include soft clay tiles and brickwork, with the patterns in blue brick being recreated. There is also a distinctive mortar joint to the original dwelling that will be used in the new wall construction. The current timber porch will be reused in a new position. As the porch forms a key element of the current elevation, this will be an important feature in maintaining the feel of the cottage as it stands. We welcome the Conservation Officer's comments, which advise that the new extension will not lead to any loss of character. Their only recommendation being that the proposed timber windows have flush fitting casements, which we are of course happy to comply with. We are also happy to provide material samples as a condition to an approval. We believe that the design of this extension and its proposed materials are in keeping with the character of the cottages and the surrounding area. I hope that the committee can agree on this and approve the application. Thank you. So it's not perfect to see on the screen there, but you can see the light as it comes around the shadows forward towards the north and not towards the south.
Right, thank you very much. If you just press the grey button so the split that goes off. Right. Thank you. David Lee, who's the ward councillor who actually listed this application, couldn't be with us tonight, but he has given me a short couple of paragraphs to read out, so I shall do that now. Budges cottages, although not listed, are an important reminder of old Wokingham and create their own unique contextual setting. Setting and character are often given prominence by field inspectors when improving applications that we do not find acceptable by stating that the application creates its own character and context, where in this case they have already done so and over many years. The building line is not defined in law, but to try and establish it in relation to the terrace properties to the left of the cottages is completely wrong, as those properties did not follow the building line of Budges cottages, so their disregard for a very clear line cannot now be used to the detriment of this cottage. In addition, the garage cannot become the line, otherwise not only could the cottages build up to this line, which is almost on the road, but so could the terrace properties to the left. The loss of light caused by this extension, which the committee would have seen, would cause a serious impact on the living conditions of the adjoining cottage. The report itself states the 45 degree is marginally impacted. If the marginal impact was on a large window, more prevalent in newer properties, the impact may be marginal, but not on the small window from which the adjoining cottage receives all its light to that living room. And lastly, the officer's report in paragraph 5 states, although full-width front extensions would generally be discouraged by the virtue of the setback positioning from the neighbour to the north, this is the very neighbouring terrace of houses which took no notice of the existing building line. So that's what David Lee had to say. Right. We do have another ward member, so I shall come to him first, which is Malcolm.
When we discussed this application the last time, I was a bit concerned about the width of the front extension at number 2, because it is not just a small porch like number 1 has, so there is a noticeable difference. I'm not sure it massively changes the character of the two houses as it happens, but there is a difference. Number 2, if approved, would be, I think, fairly prominent in comparison with its smaller neighbour and single window. I was also concerned about a possible reduction in daylight through number 1's window. It was said last time when the document that there was minimal light reduction, but now in today's note it says there is no light reduction, so I don't know which is the correct figure. Since then the committee visited the site for further checking, and we went inside number 1 to see how light or dark it was and see the impact. It is a relatively small front room with a small front window, and is therefore already fairly dark as a room. With the proposed extension of number 2, I believe we will reduce the available light a little bit more. Maybe not massively, but every bit matters when you don't have a lot of light there, even if it's just a small amount. And that might mean the resident of number 1 perhaps has to switch the electric on a bit earlier in the day as well to get some light even during the daytime. So that's not a sustainable, friendly thing to do in my opinion. I don't have a massive number of reasons for this other than the fact that it doesn't seem to be the right thing to do to make something dark when it's already fairly dark. So on the basis of my visit and just on my judgment, I'm not sure I could support this application.
I just want to come back on the light, the loss of light, the little difference there is between the two reports.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So accordingly with the 7th paragraph of my report, the original report from September's committee stated that the proposal would marginally infringe a 45-degree sightline from the habitable ground floor window. This has been properly measured in the addendum report. It is right now showing that the extension would not cut the 45-degree line of sight which was measured from the central point of the window towards the extension, which is clearly visible on this picture. Previously in the September's committee, what I have shown is the line from the corner of the extension towards the window. That's why I mentioned it would not touch the central point of the window. Therefore, accordingly with the BRE, it is acceptable. On this picture we can see a proper picture how it should be measured from the central point, which is not cutting the extension, and vertically it is the same situation. The central point of the window, it is not touched. There is no infringement from the central point of the roof of the front extension. I hope it clarifies.
Okay. It was, in fact, it's the light, but it's too, sorry. Yes, it's the light, but the other thing is, it's basically between the windows, between two jutting out brick things. When we were there, somebody outside stood at the distance where the fence would be. And I imagine if that was a wall, it would be the window, it would be into brick vertical bits. It looked like it was too enclosed and not claustrophobic exactly, but that was the impression I gained.
Michelle.
So the rule is that if it's less than 45, it is not a legal reason to turn it down. And second of all, the other one that you're looking at is their own extension that they put on the front of the door.
With regards to the second question, yes, that is correct. The porch on the right-hand side is the neighboring property's porch. And with regards to the first question, the rule is if the 45-degree line from the central point of the window would touch the corner of the extension, that it becomes unacceptable accordingly to the BRE guidelines. As we can see, the line doesn't touch the extension. The recommendation is to approve the application in this case. Thank you.
Sorry, just to add to what Paris has said, there's almost a two-stage approach on the BRE guidance. The first is to take that 45-degree line aside. If it doesn't cut, then it's not unacceptable in terms of daylight sunlight. If it does cut, then you go on to take a further test to do with what's called the vertical sky component. It may or may not still be acceptable, but it's a second phase. In this case, it actually doesn't even cut the 45, so it doesn't need to go past the first test.
What, Wayne?
It's a kind of related question. But if you go to page 13, Darius, I understand the first diagram, but how do you determine at what point you bring the diagonal from the extension of, well, the proposed new extension? I can understand number one, but how do you determine the point at which it intercepts? Have you got the other drawing there? So, how do you determine it's halfway up the roof rather than the extent of the roof, like you have done over there? So you can see the 45. Why don't you take the line right up to the top? Sorry, I just don't know the answer.
Yes, so I have shown the line from the middle of the roof of the proposed extension, and accordingly the middle point of the roof of the existing extension as well.
Okay.
Can I just help? Is that where one is meant to do it? That's the standard, is it?
Yeah, just to clarify, that's the BRE guidance on how you do that particular test. It's from halfway down the slope of the extension.
Halfway down the slope.
Yeah.
Have you finished for the moment, Wayne?
No, I understand. I feel the same way as Malcolm does. Having stood in the people's house, it might follow guidance and it might be under BRE rules, but you wouldn't want to be the recipient of this, would you? It's going to be very unneighbourly. And it's a shame that the neighbours didn't think of that, what they were going to do to their neighbours.
Okay. Angus?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a tricky one, and in a way it's a pity that we advised differently about the 45-degree line at the previous applications. I think that's generated some discussion, more discussion than perhaps we might have had before. But the proposal now meets that 45-degree line sight, means we really don't have, on that aspect, any planning reasons to refuse, as I see it, despite what we feel. And I think we must note, and I think Darius did mention this, that the side and the porch extension already there to number one has already had an impact on the setting of these cottages, both visually, and the porch, of course, has an impact on the light to the front room in number one itself. So it's in a way difficult to see that the new development really adds to that impact, and I in some way regrettably cannot find any planning reasons why we should overturn the officer's recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Angus. John?
Thank you. Getting a bit practical about this, whether it's 45 degrees or not, this is guidance, and guidance doesn't always work. And under these circumstances, I don't think that guidance works, to be candid with you. It's got very small windows, and if you stand in the house, and practically we've stood in the house, and we've looked and actually looked at the amount of light that goes in. I would agree with Angus. The light's being taken away also by the porch. and I expect if that had been built, they wouldn't probably have built the porch, but that's all a bit late. The other thing is this house has got a lovely Victorian facade, and I think to put that extension on it will make it just look like a carbuncle on the front of this house. And I can't support this application, I'm afraid.
Could you just come back whether it is guidance or it's policy, please?
The BRE is a national body, so it's a nationally used standard for daylight sunlight analysis.
Yeah, it may be a standard, but it's guidance. And if guidance doesn't work in certain circumstances, I believe you need to take that into consideration.
Yeah, Chair, it's a British standard. I'd also add, as we heard, the proposed extension is directly to the north of the neighbouring property, which further minimises any daylight sunlight impacts.
Could I have some views from other members that haven't spoken yet, please? Philip?
Yeah, I feel really very sorry for Mr. and Mrs. Downs, and it is one of those situations. And but having read all the papers and listened to the planning officers, I don't think we have any choice but to pass the application.
Yep.
I think my concern, apart from loss of light, is the alteration of the character of the cottages. And I think that they are attractive cottages as they are, and this could spoil the whole facade. So that's my reason for perhaps refusing.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I too have listened to the officers and the various reports. I did go on a site visit as well. I do feel that yes, there is possibly a degree of loss of light within that property number one, but I don't think it is a reason that we can apply at this point to turn this application down.
Okay. Right, I think that's all members have passed some comments. So I do think this is a difficult one. I'm just going to look around to see if anybody wants to put forward an alternative recommendation. No one wishing to do that. Okay. Right. We have a recommendation then. What page is the recommendation? It's on page 14 to grant the Planning Commission with the 4 conditions that are listed. In the members' update, there is an amendment to the condition number. So all those in favour of passing this application, please show. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all those against? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the application's passed. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item 47 on page 35, which is 613 Reading Road, Winnersh. It's a full planning application for a 102-bed hotel with internal bar, restaurant and drive-through Costa. Before the committee, it's a major application and we have a site visit on Friday. The case officer is Mark Croucher, who I shall hand over to.
Thank you, Chairman. There are some updates to inform members of before I progress with the presentation. The first one is to remove condition 13. The reason for that is because in discussion with the drainage engineer, he was happy with the flood risk assessment submitted and so with the Environment Agency, so it was covered by condition 14, so it's been decided that should be removed. Secondly, lighting conditions added to secure that information. There's also some amendments to paragraph 23 in my report, which is on page 28 of your agenda. and I'll just go through the amendments now.
Which page?
Sorry, it's paragraph 23 and it was on page 48, I think. 48. To go through it, it should read that there will be 190 car parking spaces, not 188. And breaking that down, it will be 167 spaces for the hotel, an integrated restaurant, and 23 spaces for the coffee shop. And the third line in that paragraph, which starts 17 cycle parking spaces, what it was meant to say is that the actual requirement is for 17 cycles parking spaces, and to meet that, they're providing 9 Sheffield cycle stands, which will accommodate 18 cycles. So hopefully that clarifies that position. I'll just do a brief presentation because members did go on site, so I'm happy to elaborate on anything I'll go through too quick now. So this is the location plan. It's probably not clear to some members, but if you can make out the blue line, that's the existing building at the moment, which will be demolished, the office building. And the proposed building is just where the cursor is now, so it just goes around here. And it's positioned further to the northeast on the site. And you can see the car park as well. If members look to the left of the slide, you can see a footpath link which will be fitted onto the main road there. So pedestrians going to Winner's Triangle Business Park will be able to cut through there rather than walking all the way around. This is just an aerial photograph just to show the site in a bit more context. You can see the existing office building there where the cursor is. You've got the residential properties there to the east, Reading Road to the south there, and obviously the main roundabout. You can see the railway line immediately to the north, and also the business park, which is located further to the north. These are just some photographs on Reading Road looking into the site. The top one, you can just see the axis there, and that will be retained as it is at the moment. The one on the bottom of the slide is just looking into the site, and you can just see the building sort of punching through the foliage there of the existing building. Once again, this is just the access to the site. One of the reasons I want to show this is because you can see the existing tree screening here to the east, and members noted that when they went out on site. The proposal also increases that quite significantly, especially down in the sort of north east of the site. This is from the main road looking east into the site. This is roughly where the footpath will come out, where the cursor is, so the sort of new footpath will come up here. And the photograph at the bottom is just taken from the sort of central point of the roundabout. This is just intended to show how the existing building at the moment sits on the site, how it impacts the character of the air. You can see there are views through the trees and vegetation there. This is the proposed elevations. It will be a 4-storey building. All the accommodation will be located above the ground floor. The sort of part to the left where the cursor is, that will be the Beefeater restaurant. The middle bit is the central atrium where the reception will be, and this red section here will be where the Costa drive-through is. And the one below is just the rear elevation. Just for clarity, these are the side elevations of the buildings. You see, the existing building is quite square, where this is rather more narrow and more longer in terms of its footprint and bulk and massing. This is a ground floor plan just to see how it is proportioned out. So you've got the restaurant here with the ancillary sort of kitchen rooms there. You've got the main entrance to the hotel in the middle, and then the Costa drive-through to the right. The sort of bit shaded in grey and where you can see the road, that's just an undercroft where the accommodation is along the first floor. So that'd be an undercroft where people will drive through, pick up a coffee and drive out again. I just put these on for sort of completeness really, but this is just the rooms to the hotel, just showing them from the first, second and also the third floor. These are some CGI images. These are CGI images, so members will note that they aren't plans, but they are just to give an indication of what it will likely look like. So you can obviously see the hotel there. And this is how the footpath is intended to link into the main road. It's an artist's impression, but one of the things our landscape officer discussed with the applicant in quite some length is that sort of the proposal of having a wildflower meadow, because in the sort of flood zone free aspect of it, and that's something that they were on board with, and that there is a landscape condition to sort of secure those details. This is looking into Reading Road, once again, how it will look in the sort of context of the area. Once again, this is sort of looking north-east. Sort of if this were a photograph, your back would be to the main roundabout, but once again, just looking in across the car park and how it would be landscaped. Members asked to include this flood map to give a bit more context about the flooding on the site. As you can see, the flood zone 3 is the darker blue bits. The hotel is located within the flood zone 2 aspect, so it's not within the flood zone 3. You can also see quite large areas of parking as well in the flood zone 2 area, and the access is just slightly covered by flood zone 3, but it's really just to show that the building is located outside of flood zone 3, and there's obviously a fair bit of parking still there. To conclude, Chairman, the application is considered acceptable for the reasons as set out in the report, and I'll happily answer any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have 2 registered speakers, the first one being David Wetherall, the agent. Come forward. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Chair. Members, my name is David Wetherall. I'm working externally with the agents for this application on behalf of Whitbread. You have before you a full application for the redevelopment of the site for a 102-bed premium hotel, the internal bar, restaurant area and Costa drive-through. The site has been vacant since 2012 and has been marketed unsuccessfully since this period. The application received 1 letter of support and 2 letters of objection. The application site is in a major development location and is situated in the immediate vicinity of bus stops and Winner's Triangle railway station, and therefore development is acceptable in principle. The aspiration is to serve the existing Winner's Triangle Business Park. Premier Inn Hotel is a mid-market offering, which is not currently provided by the Travelodge or Holiday Inn. The restaurant, which is integral to the hotel, is expected to primarily serve breakfast and meals to guests. The development will result in economic benefits to the area, such as the creation of 76 full-time equivalent jobs. The employment marketing report confirms that the loss of the existing used Class B floor space will not be detrimental to the wider provision of such floor space within the borough. The scale, bulk, massive design building is appropriate for the site. There will be no harmful impact on the immunity of neighbouring residents, with a buffer proposed adjacent to the eastern boundary and the limits on the site. With respect to flood risk, there are simply no sites that are suitable, available and viable in sequentially preferable locations within the area of search. The flood risk assessment demonstrates that the development can be occupied and operated safely without increasing the level of flood risk. A flood response plan has been conditioned as part of the officer's recommendation. Several questions were raised by members regarding highways considerations on the members' site visit. In terms of site access and trip generation, to clarify, the proposals would continue to be accessed by the same arrangements, which include a dedicated right turn pocket on the Reading Road. This junction has been assessed using appropriate junction modelling software, which confirms it will continue to operate well within capacity with no negative impacts on highway safety or capacity. And the junction assessment is based on a detailed trip generation assessment using survey data from comparably located Premier Inn and Costa drive-through sites and traffic flow surveys on Reading Road. Submitted transport statement concludes that there will be an acceptable traffic impact and sufficient car parking, totaling 190 spaces. Finally, members queried the traffic demand of the Costa in isolation. To clarify, this would generate a peak demand for up to 28 cars on a typical weekday. However, the peak periods in demand would occur during the morning, at which time hotel guests would be leaving the site and the restaurant parking demand would be minimal. Therefore, sufficient spare capacity would be available within the car park when the Costa is typically busiest. So in summary, given the clear benefits of this scheme, including job creation, and the officer's recommendation, we respectfully request that planning permission is granted for the proposed development. And finally, thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this evening.
Thank you very much. And we now have Councillor Prue Bray, Ward Member. Good evening, Prue.
Hello. Good evening, everyone. In general, I welcome this proposal because I think it will provide more facilities for Winnersh as a whole, and particularly for Winnersh Triangle. I know it's a bit taller than what's there at the moment, and it's also a little bit closer to some of the existing houses, but there should still be enough distance and enough landscaping to make it acceptable. And there are two other things I did want to mention because they have come up with residents, and that's flooding and turning in and out of the site. Now, neither Highways nor the Environment Agency nor the Council's own drainage team have raised objections, so even if I was expressing concern about it, about roads or flooding, you wouldn't be in a position to turn it down on those grounds. But I actually want to be a bit more positive than that. This part of Reading Road does flood, but there's already a substantial building on the site, and it doesn't have a proper sustainable drainage system at the moment, and this one will have a proper sustainable drainage system. So I think this is likely to improve the flooding situation rather than make it worse. And this is not a case where a developer is building houses, selling them and walking away. This is Whitbread building this to operate themselves, so therefore they are not going to want to have flooding on the site, and they're going to minimise it as with every effort that they've got. As for turning in and out of the site, we have got used to having an empty building there. When it was occupied, people did turn in and out, and it seemed to be okay. There is more traffic now. At some times of day there may be some difficulty and people may have to wait. But in about 5 years' time we're going to get the Winnersh Relief Road, and that is going to make a difference to what happens on that stretch of Reading Road. So I think that by the time this is built, we won't have long till the relief road's in place, and we should have less traffic on the road, which will actually make it more acceptable. So on the whole, yes, go ahead and approve it. I think hopefully it will be a good asset for Winnersh, and that's all I wanted to say.
Okay, thank you very much. As I've already indicated, we've got the two ward members, so I'll kick off with Philip and then I'll come to Rochelle.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I obviously welcome the development, that question. And the flood was the main issue for myself. And I still a little concerned that in clause 34, for example, it talks about the evacuation route to land outside of the floodplain is going to be under 5.52 metres of water. But if I was actually a resident there, then how would you actually get me out? So, but clearly there's some method of getting over this. But 5.52 metres is a lot of water on an excavation. Anyway, but having said that, no, welcome to the proposal.
Michelle?
I would like to ask the flood people whether this will improve the flooding problems in the area. In other words, decrease flooding problems. Another question about the sign, whether they're planning on putting a sign up or not, or is it going to be on top of the hotel? And the last is the right turn during rush hour. I'm hoping their Costa will actually have a number of customers coming in and out. I think they are too, hopefully. And will that increase it, not just the people coming in and out of the hotel, but out of Costa?
Could you still respond on those 3 points then, please?
Yeah, the application hasn't been assessed in terms of improving flood risk. There are certain benefits to the scheme, as it will have a sustainable urban drainage system. The footprint will be less, and it will be located more in flood zone 2. I think the flooding's mainly been assessed in terms of purely mitigation under today's standards and regulations, which it meets. And like I say, there is some improvements to what's there already. With regards to the signage, I think it's informative 7. I think they do need planning permission for any signage. There isn't any proposed as part of this application, and I suspect we will get an application in advertisement consent for the signage. Obviously, there will need to be signage on the building because it's a commercial building, but that's not what the members are considering at the moment. In terms of the highway impacts, I'll pass you over to Chris for that.
Just to quickly pick up on the drainage as well, whilst it's their requirement to look inside the red line boundaries to mitigate their own elements, it's worth noting that obviously since the scheme was previously built, EA has changed their requirements. So rather than being one in 100-year event storm, a lifespan of 70 years has been placed on this scheme, and therefore there's an additional 30% on top of that 1 in 100. And while the requirement would be for 594 cubic metres of storage, they're actually providing 663. So there's an improvement. The 30% plus obviously it's a larger storage capacity than it's required as well. So less would be leaving the site as it would currently. In terms to the right turn lane of traffic, the applicant's consultant obviously has set out a number of bits of detail. I could write you more if needed. But in terms of the right turn lane, it does have a right turn lane, unlike some of the other junctions down that section of the road in terms of width, which I think you all parked in last week and found that to be not as easy. We required the applicant to do some assessments, which they have done. They've used Piccadilly, which is a junction assessment tool, industry standard. And actually, when you compare it, we got them to do a worst case assessment of assessing this as a brand new site on a brownfield, rather than doing a like-for-like comparison. And actually, on assessing the two, there is marginally any difference between the existing office use and the hotel use, typically because they're the same, but they have different peaks, and the hotel is spread throughout the day rather than an office in the early hours. The cost of coffee, again, we have tricks, which you're probably aware, we talked about in the past, how we generate trip generation. For sites like this, which aren't something you can quite easily go to tricks, we ask the applicant to provide sufficient information from similar sites around the country or local, and that's what they've done. They've provided examples for Costa of a site that's quite similar, and again with that, I know you asked for figures before of how much a Costa would typically generate. The drive-through, one of the drive-throughs they've surveyed typically generate 208 movements in a day, and that day spans from 6 in the morning through till 7 at night. So over a 13-hour period, that's not a great deal. And during the peak, it has a peak in the peak, which is about 13 vehicles in and out between 8:15 and 8:30. And then for the restaurant, coffee part of the restaurant itself, which has both facilities, that can generate up to around 370 movements in, and obviously the same 370 out over the same period between 6 in the morning and 7 in the evening. So from a highways perspective, we've assessed everything. We know the access was also shut for several years, so what we've done is, whilst we would normally do a 5-year assessment of accident data, we've gone further back and we've done a 10 to 15 year, and there was only one accident in 2007 which was recorded, and that was because someone was doing a U-turn in the access and not actually looking what they were turning out into. So there is no highway, there's no highway deficiencies, it was a user error in that instance, so we've got nothing to report back.
Before I come to members, I just wanted to make it clear, although we're using the name Premier Inn and Gloucester Coffee, what we are actually looking at today is a 102-bed hotel and a coffee drive-through. So one shouldn't take any regard whether it's in favour or not of those two companies, as it were. Angus.
Thank you, Chairman. Just on that last point about coffee, of course there is a little caravan down by Hawfords, and one thinks that perhaps one may move to the other, so natural matter. Cups of coffee might not change. I think it'd be good to see this site used again. It's been empty a long time, and also welcome the reductions in carbon emissions that's built into this application.